Please welcome the wonderful Barbara Abercrombie.
I'm going to read part of an essay about the beginning and the ending of my first marriage. Oh, how I loved this man. I was obsessed with him from the moment I laid eyes on him at the beach in Puerto Rico, then married him 3 weeks later in New York, had 2 children with him, and lived with him for 26 years. I left one career for him and never looked back. I followed him halfway around the world to a war. When he quit his job as a stockbroker at age 43 and bought a sailboat, I abandoned our teenage daughters to sail with him to Greece. I even handed over my second career to him. Of course you can write a book, I told him. He looked like Harrison Ford, and during the sailing years, he got leaner and tanner and somehow younger. I, on the other hand, acquired sun damage and took up smoking again. I didn't know him when I married him. Only 3 weeks. He was a naval officer, a lieutenant, just a few years out of Annapolis and on his way to Vietnam. I was an actress in New York, about to go into rehearsals for an Arthur Kopit play at the Actors Studio. We met in a small hotel called La Playa on the outskirts of San Juan, Puerto Rico. It was on the beach, the Playa, and the air was tropic and the water was warm, and in New York that week it was snowing. My hotel reservation had been lost, and I didn't have a real room, just a spare one for $5 at night. It might have even been a rather large closet. Years later, we joked that I spent the rest of the week in his room because I wanted a bathroom upgrade. I was 24 and he was 26, taking a week's vacation before going to Vietnam. It was 1964, and both of us were dumber than skunks. Truly and deeply dumb in the ways of the world and the heart. We both smelled of bain de soleil, and that first night on the blanket on the beach, he said he was usually more charming, but the mosquitoes were driving him nuts. The second night, he proposed. I'd had 5 years of dating men in New York, the kind of men who had to check in with their shrink before making any form of commitment, such as going out of town for a weekend. So I was truly enchanted by a man who was so impetuous, so decisive. I said no, of course. I told him I was really flattered and all, but I had a career and a life. My mother called me from New York in the middle of the week and started to yell that she knew I was at the bottom of this. I was the instigator. I had no idea what she was talking about. She was known in our family for sudden emotional outbursts, but usually I knew what had set her off. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about," she yelled from Westchester County. The hotel phone was in a little room off the courtyard of La Playa. It was hot and humid, and I could smell flowers, and I was confused by this phone call. How had she found me, and why? Finally, she clarified things. "Your brother has dropped out of college and has gone to join you in Puerto Rico." It was true. She gave me the address in San Juan where he was staying, and the lieutenant and I got into a cab to go looking for him. "My family is not really like this," I said, but in retrospect, we were. We were exactly like this. We were the kind of people to drop out of college and fly to Puerto Rico at a moment's notice. 20 years later, my mother would take off from East Hampton, New York after a fight with my father and come to this same hotel and then return home fewer than 24 hours later. There was a certain sleaze element to the hotel by then, she would tell me. The fact was, we were a family of lunatics putting up a pretty good front. At the end of the week, I returned to New York for rehearsals of Kopit's play, Mille Daim. I had the lead, Sally, a Peace Corps volunteer who eventually gets boiled and eaten by the people she's trying to help. The lieutenant said he'd come to New York. I didn't believe him, but a few days later, he appeared at my door in the middle of the night. The next morning, he got on the phone and called my mother, introduced himself, and said he wanted to marry her daughter before he had to leave for Vietnam. Oddly, this struck me not as new looniness for our family, but as sanity. I thought he was deeply and impressively sane. My mother, who by now knew he was a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, was all for it. A wedding in 10 days? No problem.